Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Selling Fort Collins podcast. I am so happy to be here with Cynthia Eichler, the president and CEO of Visit Fort Collins. Cynthia, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
We'll explain to our listeners, what is Visit Fort Collins?
We see ourselves as a little bit of that hidden gem, if you will, because a lot of people are like, oh, are you part of the city? No. Oh, do you work with the chamber? Well, we work with the chamber, but we're not the chamber. And that's different for every community. But in Fort Collins, we're actually our own entity. We celebrated our 40th anniversary in October, and we have a contract, though, with the city. So we are the official marketing arm for the city for leisure, for meetings and conferences. International, too. A lot of people don't realize that we actually do have international guests, and we work with the Colorado Tourism Office pretty tightly, if you will, knowing that oftentimes international guests choose Colorado. Well, then how do we make sure they find us? So that's our job also. So it's a fun job.
I bet. And when these people are inquiring about Fort Collins, it's your job and Visit Fort Collins' job to get them linked up with everything from where to stay, what to do.
Absolutely. You get to be a good question asker, and depending upon the audience that we're working with, we might be in real sell mode, but we might be in question asking mode. What do you like to do? Or how would you like to spend your time? Or how do you spend your time at home? Because that helps us know how to create a great meeting, a great vacation, a great foodie experience, whatever it is that they love, we want to deliver that in the right Fort Collins way.
Okay. And take us back a step. How did you get to Fort Collins, and how long have you been doing what you're doing?
So March makes 10 years with Visit Fort Collins, and I really consider it to be a privilege now. That being said, I am a Colorado native. My family are farmers and ranchers out in southeastern Colorado. It is a teeny tiny town called Carville. You have to do what I just described, or you do not go there. Big graduating class of 6. So my first touch points with Fort Collins were as a kid to come to science fair and band day and those kind of things. And I was just like, Fort Collins is a college town, right? So I had the good fortune to meet Jack Gillum, who was Bob Everett's son-in-law.
Oh, wow.
And we both worked in shopping centers.
Those of you listening, Bob Everett, fame, such a legendary developer.
In Fort Collins. Yep. His fingerprints are in a lot of things.
Everywhere.
And I always wanted to have my mouth quiet and my ears open if Bob was speaking, because the things he knew and encouraged were fantastic. So in 1995, I arrived to be the marketing director for Foothills Fashion Mall at the time, and was on the board for a while, also with Visit Fort Collins. I actually left my beloved Fort Collins and went to San Francisco for a couple of years. When this job opened up, it was if there was ever anything else I wanted to do, this was it. So I threw my hat in, and here we are. 10 years later, I'm doing some fun stuff.
I'm curious, how have you seen the type of visitor to Fort Collins change over the past 10 years?
And I can even dial it back. What we did for the Everett companies is not so different than what I do today, right? We market to people, we bring them to town. We have gone from a stronger agri-based guest to a more cosmopolitan, and that would be the word that I would use. We still have our ag friends. We do. They're here, southeastern, western Colorado, certainly Wyoming, Nebraska, and Colorado has become a bit of an it location, and Fort Collins has its own place in that list. I often have people say, aren't you worried about Fort Collins changing so much that we become like XYZ community that, somebody doesn't love in Colorado? And I said, I don't. Because when we talk to people and they come to Fort Collins, they figure out pretty quickly, are they the fabric of Fort Collins, or are they the fabric of Colorado Springs or Boulder or Denver or Durango? Like seems to find like. And so I think we find more of who we are, and we just become better.
I've seen that same thing. I've never put it quite like that, but I think that's very well said. You have a prominent retail location in Old Town Square, and I walk by it multiple times every week. I know a lot of other people do too. You mentioned before we started rolling here that just it's interesting the types of questions that you get and how that's kind of changed. And talk about that a little bit. What kind of questions are you getting from these people that just pop in?
Just wander in. You can tell pretty quickly if they're just a leisure guest, and I shouldn't say just a leisure guest, but what are they here for, bike riding or food, or if it's in the summer, are they rafting, right? And so we, again, ask those questions and try to get them connected to have just a great fun time while they're here in Fort Collins. And then you have folks who will start to ask, tell us a little more about the different parts of town, or we love Mountain Avenue and the houses, right? And so we get this sense really quickly of this is not your average vacation trip. And so it's kind of fun. And I would tell you that has become a lot more prominent. And certainly since COVID, when so many of us had to reflect, who are we? Where are we? What do we want to do? Where do we want to live? If we have an opportunity to live wherever that is. And Fort Collins seems to find itself attracting a really, I think, diverse, interesting group of people to come and explore. An example I had, this was even before we opened our new space, and these folks came in and they were like, oh, we love biking, and, we're just really looking for another little bit of a change. And I was like, well, where are you from? And they're like, oh, Bend, Oregon. And I was like, all right, that's somebody I benchmark against. And they said, we really would like to find an international airport where we're within an hour away. And, we have 6 bikes. We spend half the year in Italy. Where do we spend the rest of the half? They said, Denver's halfway to all of our family on the East Coast. So we're trying to figure out what that is. They chose here. They didn't choose Baby Boulder, or another great biking community. We were their place. And it was fun to have that conversation and see what lights up your face. Really quickly if you've hit on a chord for them that's really important.
Well, that carries on a thread we were talking about before we started rolling as well, which is there are more people moving to Fort Collins, choosing to make Fort Collins their long-term home that could live anywhere. I mean, they could live anywhere, and they're evaluating other places, but they're choosing Fort Collins. I think that's really fascinating. You mentioned, I hope it's okay to bring this up, there's a filmmaker who is in that category, who is, just tell us that story a little bit.
So a gentleman that I met recently is relocating, has been for almost 2 years from the Dallas area here, has lived in some pretty nifty places as well, has a couple of youngsters now. And when their youngsters got into the school that they really hoped, then it moved fast. But they looked a lot of places and they said, the sustainability, the outdoor lifestyle, the fact that people are out and about all the time, that's who we are. And so we realized we just had to get the kids in the right school, and we were off and running. In fact, I've been so excited to be able to offer this gentleman to come and be on our board. I think he brings, he chose us first. And then he figured out the rest of it. And I hear that time and time again. People who move either without employment or they can move with employment, right? And do it remote or travel. And yet this lifestyle, this fabric that we make up, they choose.
Right. I can't wait to find out who this person is. He's on the board. So
he's going to be on the board in January, yes.
So we'll know soon enough.
Exactly.
Whether it's the filmmaker or a person stopping into the Visit Fort Collins location in Old Town Square, or, maybe it's somebody who's involved with, a company leadership and they're doing a stay in town at the Elizabeth or the Armstrong and putting on a seminar. What advice are you giving these people? And they're just, hey, what should I do here? I mean, there's so much, right? We could go so many different places with this as residents who just, live, eat, breathe Fort Collins every day and just love it. But how do you synthesize that down into advice for these people, and what do you tell them?
Yeah, something quick. One thing, we went through a branding process last year, and I learned this during the branding process. The group that helped us with this said, you all don't actually understand what you have here, and our job is to not mess it up. Because they said, you all hand the baton from community member to community member with such fluidness, you don't know it. So if you sit at Odell's and you say, hey, I'm in from Chicago, and they're like, cool, what do you want to do? And they're like, I want to hike. And they're like, ooh, do you like hard? Do you like, and we inherently share, right? So they may already have 5 suggestions before they ever walk in my door. So they're asking for another little something. And we just try to mine a little further, So if you've heard all the great hiking things or the biking things, did you know we actually have great art and culture, right? And here's how that looks like here. Or here's the music scene that's kind of a hidden gem also. It's different than Nashville. It's different than, Chattanooga or some other places. But it's here. A lot of people don't actually realize we have a really vibrant hip hop community here.
I did not realize that.
It's fascinating to me and what I have learned. And the music district actually facilitates some really fun stuff. And so I think it is find out what they do know, find out what they'd like to do or what they already love to do, and then point them in the right direction and then just get out of their way. Because we do a good job. And I think, again, it comes from love of community. It is not hard for any of us. Jacob Castillo, he always teases me. He's like my whole family comes on vacations here. And he goes, and I'm always like, oh, we're that place, aren't we? And he goes, I live here because I love here. But I forget, he goes, they legit come to vacation. So they come and see me and the kids, and it's great. But then we raft and we bike and we do all the things that we just do. But they come to vacation here. That was fun.
I mean, that there's a trend I've seen in just helping people buy homes here, and that is people summering in Fort Collins. This past year, I worked with 2 different groups that were purchasing, and they were summering in Fort Collins. And this is the first time ever I've heard of summering in Fort Collins, but it makes sense when you talk to them. And yeah, you really can. Because you look at Lowry State Park, Horsetooth, if you want to get out on the water, if you're going to go on amazing hikes, mountain biking, cycling. One of the groups was really into all of that. So they're over by Horsetooth Reservoir. The other group likes more of the urban life and just the shops and the farmers markets and the festivals and the music, all these things. So, I mean, it makes sense, but that's a trend I'm seeing. You mentioned the music district briefly. That's something that hasn't been brought up on the show before. Can you tell people what that is and how they might get involved with that?
I can, and I want to mention wintering. I have a friend from my industry who lives in California. They have decided that this is most likely the relocation point. Last child is 15. This kid has done more research than mom and dad, knows the high school, knows the sports, but they're coming for 3 weeks in December to make sure that the California to actual winter works for them. So they're wintering, which I also think is smart, right? And that, they're going to VRBO it to just make sure that this makes sense for them. So
they'll VRBO it and they'll rent it out in the summertime when all the tourists are coming in for the festivals and all those things we just mentioned. That is interesting. I worked with a couple, thinking of this now, who actually is wintering too. I had forgotten that for a moment, but they have their other residence in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Lots of snow. They're now going to be in Jackson Hole for the summer months, and they're going to winter in Fort Collins. And it is another one, again, carrying on another thread that we had before we started rolling here. Kids in this area, their kids are no longer kids, they're adults. And there are increasingly more very high-paying jobs, tech sector, healthcare sector, others as well in this local economy that just weren't here before. So now they are. That's bringing parents, and that group is wintering here too. So wintering and summering in Fort Collins, 2 new trends.
Yeah, I think so. And I kind of love it because it goes back to finding the right place for you. And that enhances the community versus, taking away from it. Okay, the music district. Well, the music district, is a component from the Bohemian Foundation. And it is one of the most, I don't know that I've understood it as well until this year. We would do little snippets with them, but we've had the good fortune to do more with the music district. They have memberships for $30 a month where musicians can go actually record in their studios. They bring in really cool educational opportunities, and networking and how-tos. It's neat. They have they have touring musicians who can actually stay on campus, and do some things with them. And so it is a different way that strengthens our music economy. So people come and they're here and they're gone, or they're here and they're growing. A lot of the folks who also work at the music district have already had their big band experience or their international touring experience. And when they're done with that, how do they stay plugged in? And I think they found a real home in what happens at the music district. We had an international sensation here 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, in which I got to participate. I'm not going to say the name just because I am not sure where the process is with this, but this individual is well known to an international market with 32.3 million social media followers, who came and did a camp at the music district for underserved women, transgender, and LGBTQ. 30 musicians from all over the world, and I kid you not, Sydney, the Philippines, Brooklyn, flew in from all these cool places, and they did a camp with this individual. And I went, what? And they were like, yeah, it'll be the most famous person none of us have ever known, because we're not in that genre of music. They're so well known internationally. She came the weekend of the beautiful snow on Friday nights, and I was helping drive her around, and she's like, this looks like a Hallmark movie set, but it's real, and I cannot wait to go home and put up my Christmas tree. And she could walk around actually without security and have I think what was unforgettable experience. There's another plant, right? And might she be back, or will she do the camp again because it was easy to be here? She found the talent fantastic. And again, just kind of a charming, different place with this crazy infrastructure that most of us who are not musicians don't really understand. But I'm getting there. I'm learning, and I'm looking for more things to be able to partner to strengthen again that music community. We always tease that during the summer, if you aren't in a concert once a week, you're not trying very hard. It's everywhere, and it's great music.
Well, and that music district is beautiful. I mean, this location, it's just right off College Avenue, nestled perfectly in between Old Town Fort Collins and CSU's campus. It's beautiful from the outside. It's an incredible facility on the inside too. So it's neat to learn a little bit more about it. And it's important to point out here too that you are not resting on your laurels in any way. I mean, clearly you're always looking like, what can we do more? What can we do better? And I'm fascinated by that. Just looking at a little bit online, you've introduced programming at the Visitor Center, including music showcases, TED Talks, pop-up markets. You've looked at interesting creative ways to integrate the community with tourism. Tell us, in doing all of that, kind of what stands out, maybe this last year or two. What's been a big focus of yours?
A couple of things that were so helpful, and again, really supported by stakeholders. One that has allowed us to do more of what you just mentioned was the Tourism Improvement District. That actually occurred in 2021. We started some of the efforts in 2020. And what that is, ours is only the second one in the state. There are a few more that are coming behind us. Denver had one. But the hoteliers agreed to come together with us. And in essence, it's an assessed marketing fee. And it gets remitted in the exact same way that lodging tax does. However, the hoteliers are the ones who steer that part of the funding ship, if you will. So things that really are important to them, which sometimes is programming, to help strengthen what we talk about destination development. So that's one. It doubled our budget. When your budget doubles, you get to do some more cool things, right?
You get to do more programming.
We do get to do more programming. So
what's an example of some of the programming you've done?
I was going to say very strong in music.
Mhm.
We in this last year more international. We've also started something called we call it Forever Fort Collins. So I'm going to include you in this swoop, right? A lot of us belong to associations or whatever our favorite hobby is, right? And we go places and we do those things. We're trying to encourage people to say, how do you bring those to Fort Collins? Because that supports your restaurants, your retailers, your hotels, you know, all of it, service industries. And so we're trying to encourage people to think about how they can bring their business home, bring their hobby home. How do we host more of those things to strengthen that? So I think that's a big one. Hosting our 40th anniversary was fun. We did 6 nights of music. We did 6 concerts in a row, all different genres. The Welcome Center, although it seems simple, we kind of turned the model on its head. I actually have had the pleasure of speaking twice for our Destination International Association because there's a lot of, how do we do this today? You know, you've mentioned some of our affluent guests and our tech-savvy folks. Paper products are appropriate sometimes, but often a lot less. So we've upped the digital game and have a lot less paper, and we have a lot of lifestyle. We also have been hosting, you mentioned the TED Talks. This is a collaboration with CSU that I am actually delighted with, where really cool people on campus are coming into the heart of downtown and talking about this stuff for free. Campus TED Talks, they call them Ram Talks. So for instance, this year, 2 of my favorites. One was a professor who has also been highlighted on NPR. He has figured out that elephants name each other and have their own language. And right in the middle of the city, you got to listen to this, right? It was in our new location, you know? So we took the front third of former Cooper Smith's poolside. We now have our own stage. We have a great sound system, all of these fun things. So the first and third Wednesday of every month, we're skipping December and January, just December and holiday break for CSU. And the stock show, which is also a heavy lift for them. But it's been fascinating. 50% of the folks are repeat and 50% are new almost every time. So you can go out and peek on this website. If you Google Ram Talks, you're going to find it. You'll see the lineup of who's coming next, figure out if you'd like to come or not. But part of what I love about what we're doing is connecting. So a little bit of what you're doing right here, right? And connecting Fort Collins to Fort Collins and connecting others to Fort Collins, because we make sure, so we have a newsletter that goes to every front desk in the hotel in the city. That's on there. So if you're in town and your Wednesday night happens to be free on the first or the third Wednesday, what a fun thing to come down and see who we are. And how does that resonate with you? Or you're a repeat, person. You're here with Intel or our friends from Woodward, or you regularly come to CSU. There's some fun ways to plug in that I think are really powerful and interesting and give you true flavor of who we are.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone, I think a lot of people will Google Ram Talk after listening to this. Because how fascinating! I know I will, and going and hearing a TED Talk in Old Town Fort Collins is really cool, and it's free.
And there's food. I'm not kidding. Everything is free for that evening. So we have food and drink. Sometimes there's alcoholic beverages. Sometimes there's mocktails. It kind of like on October, it was very Halloween themed for some fun stuff. So everybody works really hard to make it relevant and to make it super comfortable. The smallest one, I think, was 78 in attendance, and the largest was over 150.
And it's free, and you're feeding people, and you're getting
so
drinks.
Fun.
What other city does anything like this anywhere? I just think, as somebody who was already the biggest fan of Fort Collins, and naturally people question my motives because I am a real estate agent, but I've always been the biggest fan of Fort Collins. I moved here in 2006 after visiting my sister, who was at the time the resident vet at Colorado State University. And I fell in love with Fort Collins immediately. Over the next decade, I got into real estate immediately, and over the next decade, moved my entire family tree here. And so I, as someone who's clearly a fan of Fort Collins, learning things like this, I mean, I'm continually just excited, grateful to be here, almost beyond words.
Well, and we're still getting the word out, right?
Right.
You got to learn. We opened our new location in August, so it's still pretty fresh. And so every opportunity we get to make sure people know not just that, but a Maker's Mark or Sana Kendall with the city had a BioLife Sciences group. 95% of those folks were from Denver and Boulder. So they came for an event from 4 to 6, and then they all went and ate. Right? So we talk about being a launch pad. So we're connectors and a launch pad. How do we get you here? And then how do we get you out doing cool things around town?
Right. It's not a hard sell.
No.
Either.
Oh my gosh.
You know, when they come for that event, they look around and they see, the most beautiful, thriving downtown that you will see anywhere. It's not a hard sell. They want to go out and they want to experience that. So, definitely going to Google Ram Talks. I'm curious, these other programming, music, all these other things. What's the best way for people to get connected with that? Is it the Visit Fort Collins website?
Yep. So if you go there and there are things to do or calendar, either of those buttons will get you. You can also sign up for a newsletter or those weekly happenings if you want to make sure it just shows up in your mailbox. We make that easy on you. So a couple of ways. We should also share a little bit, if it makes sense for you, the journalist that we host in Fort Collins, because most people don't know that is a key thing that we also do.
I did not.
So we just, we host journalists all year long. I would say summer months are always more vibrant. This October, we had 8. And these are folks, because we'll often have people say, did you see that article in Ford? Right? And I'm like, I did. Well, that's because we hosted them. So we have a PR agency. We kick stuff out to specific journalists. We work with the Colorado Tourism Office, who are also amazing partners. Last week, the week before, there's an article that came out in Men's Journal, 3 days in Fort Collins. It is one of the larger articles I've seen anyone write about us in quite some time. He mentioned 28 different businesses. He told you where to get the best breakfast sandwich, where to, do all the things. One of my board members, after they saw it, they're like, I live here and I want to go do that 36 hours in Fort Collins. I was like, thank you. So that's another thing of when you said, once people are here, it is not hard to get them back. Yes, 1,000 times. It's why we want to bring meeting planners here. If we get them here, it's a matter of time, right? Unless we have an infrastructure challenge or they say we have 1,000 people and we can't quite figure out how to accommodate 1,000 people. We
can't yet,
not
but
yet.
It is going in that direction, isn't it?
That might be another pet project Cynthia's working on. So bringing journalists that we think make sense, are from high quality. That can be, we track our international. Sometimes we have to have people transcribe. Hi, here's a great article from the French guest, right? And we don't know what they said. We hope it's good, so we tease. But it is all of those things. Vortic Watches. We had a gentleman who came to do a story on bourbon and chat with Old Elk, and we noticed his timepiece. And we said, oh, do you like cool watches? And he's like, I do. So we walked him across and he got his own personal tour. And before he left town, there was an article in Forbes about their watches.
Vortic Watches, made right here in Fort Collins by a local entrepreneur.
Yep.
Fascinating.
We have all these fun nuggets, right? I mean, I really appreciate, like, once in a while somebody like, oh, I've never been to lunch there. And I'll be like, oh, okay, right? And we get to hear so much about that early in, maybe sometimes even before they're open, but it allows us to help them and again to strengthen the fabric. Or if we were to talk about Alan and Silver Grill, right? He's mentioned in that particular article, and it was so fun when he found out, they were in there for that, and he goes, "I better go buy more food." And he's teasing her like, "Yeah, Alan, you better go buy more food." And it goes back to a lot of people think marketing is fun and fluff. And you probably know as well as anybody else that is not a true statement. If you are not visible, you are invisible. And it does not take long to become invisible. So being really smart and strategic about how you reach out, what's your theme for the year, what is the theme nationally, or is biking now cold and rafting is hot, or, whatever it is.
Right.
So there's all these subtle things that you're trying to pay attention to and continue to entice people to come and share about us.
Well, it's the lead domino to so many of these people that we were discussing earlier deciding to move here. I think of that couple from Jackson Hole. They just started reading about it. Who knows where they saw it, but it was there's a high percentage chance that it was an article written by one of these journalists that you were hosting here in town. And this is a big time executive that could buy a second home anywhere, chooses Fort Collins. I mentioned to you, and I might have mentioned on the show before, but earlier this year, I helped the head rowing instructor for West Point Academy, who retired in May of this year. I helped her and her husband purchase a home in Fort Collins, another couple that could have gone anywhere. And these are the types of people that are seeing these articles. One of the top people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota is another one. They're finding out about this somehow. And I think, we shouldn't take that for granted. And we need to understand that, these things matter. This is an exceptional place. People who visit here are telling their friends. But if we can have these journalists visit what you're doing and write these articles, how powerful. And that
and it's
Men's Health
authentic.
article, it's authentic, right?
We give them an itinerary. We have some who want their hands held a little more and others who are like, great. And we don't hear from them until we see the article. I mean, it is not, some people are like, oh, it's pay to play. And I'm like, it's really not. Mm-hmm. You put your invitation out there, you try to make sure their needs are met, and then get out of the way. We do some education. We do have some partners who are just more knowledgeable about hosting a journalist, or that on occasion things change really quickly and it's like, oh, the weather gets crazy, so you can't do XYZ. What's your plan B or plan C, if it's the case may be. But it's being flexible and adaptable and just always continuing to be thoughtful and creative and find new angles,
I think people are maybe rightfully skeptical about the pay to play thing, right? Because that happens a lot of places. I think back to last week, I was in Santa Monica and I took my family, my wife, my two kids to the, Santa Monica Boulevard, this shopping district. I looked at it online, and the picture online, it's thriving retail shops and everything is just beautiful and family friendly. And then in reality, when I was there, it was 50%, this is a rough number, but it's seemingly 50% vacancy of retail and an environment that, suffice to say, did not feel family friendly. This very different from what was promoted. So I think people are skeptical, but yes, in this case, you're hosting these people. You're getting out of the way. If they were to write something that wasn't overly positive, you're not contacting them and asking them to pay you back for the hotel room and the dinner at Jack's or Austin's.
And it simply means our shine wasn't on, right? Or they didn't have a great server that evening. Those are real things, If they had that experience every location, we'd probably have a very different kind of article. But as long as, and we're all going to have an off day, but this way they're taking their own photos or they've requested something from us as a follow-up. But so many of these folks will take their own, photos while they're here, which is cool because it's through their lens and their experience.
Yeah. Where do you guide people when they want to get outside of Old Town? They want to experience the nature, the trails, a lot of options there. What are some of the things you share with them?
Again, it's a little bit of, in our visitor guide, those of us who live in Colorado and we know what black, blue, and green ski routes are, that's what we do for hiking. So we kind of equate it that way to say, do you really want to get out there and do a hard hike? Do you need something more moderate or something really easy? Do you have somebody in your party who needs ADA kind of accessible opportunities too? So making sure that we send them to the right place. It's interesting because you can do everything from go to Laurie State Park and travel all the way across to Larimer County, right? And we have to explain that you have to get 2 parking permits because they're 2 different organizations, even though you can't see that on a map. Right. Or do you want to go up to Gray Rock? Do you want to go to the Mish? What might that look like? Do you want to even get more adventurous and head all the way up to the Moose Visitor Center in Walden? We sometimes have to remember, too, that guests are willing to go further than we do on an average day, right? Maybe you want Cameron Pass, or you want the train museum in Greeley, because guests do not care where our municipal lines are. So sometimes we're making sure we connect them with a community close to us. And again, we hand the baton back and forth. So listening to what those folks want, or they're like, tell me the quirkiest thing. I'm like, go to the washing machine museum in Greeley. And they're like, are you serious? We're like, yeah. And he's actually really cool, right? There's the story. So what are those fun things to share? And if somebody's going to whitewater raft, I'm going to ask them, are you ready in June? If you want a calmer experience, this is not the month to go. If you're experienced and fearless, fantastic. If not, let's get you at the end of July.
Yeah, just because it says the beginner, right? If it's June, I don't know if there is such thing.
Right? No, you have to know.
That lower section of the river is still pretty wild.
Pretty vibrant when it's in June. So making sure, again, that it's a fun experience versus a not fun experience. And, we have so many good partners to hand off to, though. And bikes. Oh my goodness. We're almost to the point we're going to be able to ride all the way to Greeley, all the way to Loveland, and back to Fort Collins. Holy moly, where can you do that?
Well, yeah, and that's a recent development, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had
that last little dab.
Head of Parks on a previous show, the podcast here, talking about that a little bit, and then the article just came out more recently in the Coloradoan.
And that's fantastic, right? Because you can mountain bike, you can road bike, you can ride the dams at Horsetooth, you can do so many different things. You can do a brew tour on your bike between 3 cities.
Right.
Holy moly.
Right. Well, speaking of previous guests too, Danny Grant was on the show, owner of the Mishawaka. Have you heard what she's doing up in the canyon?
Yes. Oh, yes.
So she's got her tiny home development where you can go and you can stay, and they're going to have shuttles, so you can get shuttled over to a show at the Mish, which, look, I've talked about this briefly before, but everybody listening, Red Rocks is the outdoor venue everyone talks about, and it is amazing. My favorite is the Mish, which is short for the Mishawaka. You can look it up online, get the upcoming, calendar of shows. But you are just right in the Poudre Canyon. There's rocks in the background. You're going to see wildlife. I mean, it is just the most beautiful place to watch a show. And now Danny Grant, the owner, is combining that with a place so you don't have to, come all the way. And you can get shuttled up the canyon. CSU has a great shuttle service, and that's the way to do the show. If you were going to do it, you park at CSU, you take the school bus up, it takes you back down. That works great. But if you want the full overnight experience now, you can stay up at Danny's new project in a little tiny home. They have breakfast and coffee there, and they'll shuttle you, back and forth from the show. So just a really neat thing. Another neat thing from a very impressive local entrepreneur here.
Oh, I know. She's amazing. And I smile. 3 of my team members have been up. I did not get to go the day they all went up. I have no doubt. And like what you just said, that's on our pitch sheet now for journalists to say, here's a very different experience. We always pitch the Mish because it's so amazing, right? And I'm like, you can see somebody rafting by while you're having lunch and, all the fun things that they do. But this is one more layer. And you can't replicate this. That's the other thing. There are things that you can have a great breakfast in a lot of places. However, you can't have a silver grill, cinnamon roll just anywhere. But where else can you do that? Right. So it gives us another point of distinction. And Grant, it's that Danny saw this and acted on it. And I think that's another one of those interesting Fort Collins things, that we live in a community where people see things and then they do it, which is where some of those other folks want to come, because I think that it's their kind of people, if you will, be creative, innovative, and we do it. We don't just talk about it. So I would imagine some of the folks who relocate here, then what boards are they on? What are they supporting for kids or grandkids? They just weave themselves right in. And I also believe that sometimes we don't always know their history. Some are open about that, and others are like, yeah, I just moved here. And then later you're like, oh, super cool, right? It's a little humbling. You're like, oh, maybe it's better I didn't know that you used to do that. So, but they weave themselves in. They find the right way to plug in. And, I think volunteerism is a big thing in Fort Collins.
Yeah, it is. I think it just goes along with the sense of community. People want to, it's ownership. Yeah. How, what can I get involved? How can I be a part of this? I think people are by and large very grateful.
Oh, absolutely.
The visitor's guide, is that available online?
It is available online. So you can download it, certainly from our website. The Colorado Tourism Office also has that available if you want a printed copy. There's a little box you check, and we mail them out weekly, and they go all over the place. So if somebody really likes that, in your hand, we can do that too.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much in there too. I think, mentioning again, the hikes, check out those levels, everybody, the green, the blue, the black. I think you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're, especially a situation where you're maybe challenged too much. And I have found friends visiting from the Midwest, different elevation here, that there can be what we think is an easy hike or a moderate hike. Maybe not, and it's not that they're in bad shape. A lot of times it's just the altitude is a really big thing. And, kind of the same thing goes for like the whitewater rafting. It's like, yeah, what you said is great. June, a very different time than a little bit later in the summer when the water is a little bit lower. So just really good things to point out. And I'm curious too, as somebody who knows maybe more than anybody else about all the things you can do here, all the ways you can just kind of get tapped into our community and just do fun things. How do you fill up your calendar? Like, what do you do for fun? You have friends from out of town visiting. Like, what's on your list?
It is probably some of those very typical things, though. I would say music is always up there. Craft made, which could be food. We have we giggle. We keep track of all the different flights that you can get in Fort Collins. You can get a coffee flight, a chocolate flight. Now you can get a pancake flight.
Where do you get a pancake flight? I have to know.
You may have to see the new visitor guide for that one. But people grab onto you can do a wine flight. Where else can you do a wine flight, right? But that's a language that a beer town understands. Mm-hmm. And so how do you parlay that into other things? So I always want to know what do they want to do? So I would say music, definitely some food. I have a pennant for pie, so you can find me either at Ginger and Baker or me at my pie, taking somebody one place or the other. And then downtown, you cannot go wrong with just hanging out downtown.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's the most popular answer. It's what I hear all the time is, we don't have to actually make a plan. We don't have to map out this complicated agenda, because it's go downtown, find a parking space. And enjoy.
Right.
And that's all you need.
Downtown is key. I will say, because we sometimes gently share with somebody, we are Visit Fort Collins, not Visit Downtown. Of course, we love downtown, and we work with our DDA friends all the time, because we would be silly not to, right? But there are hidden gems in other parts of the town. So again, what is it that you want to do? I sometimes will have somebody say, well, where's the most out of the way, whatever, that does great IPAs, right? And so we'll pick a little bit at what that might be, or a family-friendly location, right? And so missing the name, there's one that they actually have like a little kids center. There are tricycles and books and games. And so if you've got young families vacationing together, we want to get them there so that they can, have that connection. So no matter what part of town you stay in, although we all need some of the nationals, as far as restaurants or retail, we always try to weave in. If you are staying on the Harmony corridor, I want to make sure you know about Auto Pint, right? Because it's local beers, regional beers, and some of the best, I call it grown-up pizza, right? It's our kids might not love it, but
and another great local operator,
right?
By the way,
and that's, I think, so much of our travel today, whether we're for work or for leisure, we want to do what people do in that city, so just trying to make sure that we can connect them no matter what part of the city you are in.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned kids visiting too, and that's something we should maybe touch on because I know you're very involved with the Museum of Discovery. You tell our listeners about the museum.
I would love to tell about the museum. So the Museum of Discovery is this amazing partnership. I actually serve on the nonprofit board, just a beloved institution. And this is another one of those. People study our museum. They're like, how do you guys do this? How do you have 2 executive directors? Nobody does that. We do. And it makes perfect sense to us. It's operations plus nonprofit. And then how do we do more? They have a couple of exhibits there right now about skin. And so your youngsters would probably love this, where you can go touch a rhinoceros and here's what fish are. And here's what a porcupine would look like. And here's something that would simulate what it would feel like, right? And then they've paired it through the month of December with something from the Smithsonian, which not everybody gets. We were chosen because of some of these unique things that we all do in that space. And it's the bias inside us. And it pairs skin and then how we might perceive or act or why some of the things happen, which I think in today's world is just very wise. And for this particular display, there is no charge. Just pay what you can. So an opportunity for our community to support everyone to come see it, to feel it, to have that experience and start some amazing conversations. Oftentimes people will be like, well, isn't it a kids museum? I'm like, not unless you're just, my spouse loves to show off for me every time we go. If you have seen, there's a piano and a fulcrum that lifts the piano. And I can count on Bernie going over and be like, look how strong I am, right? Doesn't matter what age. Young at heart. And so there's history, there's the special events, there's kinetic, there's the garage band stuff, right, which is bohemian, and it goes back to the fabric. There's a tiny tots space. So kiddos, as long as they can stand up, they can crawl under like the Brio trains and pop up in the middle of it and play with the trains, or they can go put on clothing and be a princess or a doctor or whatever they want to be. And so really all ages can go. That is one of my favorite things. And it is not just a kiddo space. Doesn't matter what age. And the Digital Dome. They have amazing shows. That's another one, too, that I often think our 20s and 30-year-olds, where do you go if you don't want to go to a craft brewery, right? What do you do? That's a great place to go for a fun date or one of the programming elements that they do in the evening that they pair a show with music. They have some good stuff. Check it out.
Yeah, what kind of shows are in that Digital Dome? Because I know that's like a fancy, like you're sitting down in there, you're looking up. It's
sort of like IMAX, right? I mean, it's very similar. It's smaller. It's a little more intimate. Sometimes they have a live performance. They just did a Taylor Swift, music thing. You got to make your own Swiftie bracelets. They have holiday movies. I was like, there's a couple. There's like an Elmo and a Big Bird one that everybody loves for Christmas. Like that 2 to 5-year-olds. If that's not your group, it'll drive you a little crazy. But if it is, they love it, right? So it's just checking out their calendar too, and you can go look at the Museum of Discovery and see what's coming. I will also say, gently, a membership, if you live in Fort Collins, is not that much. That way you can go anytime, and it's reciprocal all over the country. You want to go to Denver's museum? Guess what? Show your museum card from Fort Collins and you get in there. I actually used it in Philadelphia. So it's this wonderful reciprocal membership that our museum is a part of, and you can actually use it all over the country. So sometimes for grandparents or aunties and uncles, that's a real bonus, which I think is cool.
I love that. I would second it. It's an amazing value. It is. I mean, my wife and I have a 6 and 7-year-old. They're 15 months apart, and we've spent, over the past years, a lot of time there, particularly when they were little and just kind of, touching things and feelings like that section you mentioned. I mean, they just loved going there.
And we don't have to say no 8,000 times, right? You can touch anything in the museum, which I also love.
Yeah. And then now, I want to bring it back. I think like the rhino skin and those different things would be super fascinating to them. The shows, super fascinating to them. But also it is for adults. If you want to learn about the history of Fort Collins, the beet farming industry that was so big here, and, see pictures of what Old Town looked like, 100 years ago, 120 years ago. Really fascinating to see those things and learn about what the industries were. You can go back even further, learn about, some of the, the original Army forts and things. So a lot of education, a lot of history there. So there are things for the adults. Really, really good to point out. I think it's also, something you mentioned in there is, what if people don't want to go to the breweries? And it truly is impossible to talk about Fort Collins without talking about the breweries, because the breweries are amazing. It's not just a saying, this is the Napa Valley of beer.
Yes. It's authentic.
It's authentic. Our craft breweries, there's so many, they're all so incredible, and they all offer something different. This is the Napa Valley of beer. But if you don't want to do the beer thing, the art walk is one thing that comes to mind. The foodie walk. All of these things that you can do in this area where you can get out, you can walk around, you can experience, just really amazing food, really amazing curated special meals. You can also all of the art studios and things.
Oh, yeah. Foothills does a nice winter market, if folks don't know about that. Every Saturday, and it's pretty robust at this point. Like a lot of things, they started, maybe a little smaller. That is not the case any longer. So during the winter, you can go get some winter produce, and then there's some arts and craft element to that, which I think is really nice, but safe and easy. If it's snowy and slick, that's a great place to go. I have a random one that I think a lot of folks aren't also. Did you know we have the Colorado Shoe School in Fort Collins?
No.
You can make your own shoes.
Where's that?
It's up near the Bellevue area. And so a really talented couple, Annabelle and I'm forgetting her husband's name, but they are fantastic. We have brought journalists to come make their own. You can make a pair of tennis shoes in a day. You can make a pair of boots in 2 days. There are folks who actually sign up for a whole week, and they make something much more intricate, if you will. So again, craft made. Here's an experience, whether you have a 5 and a 6-year-old or a 56-year-old. Those are experiences you can go have together. The cooking school, also Ginger and Baker and their cooking, location, Farm Fusion. They're a little north outside of town. So there are so many places that you can do things together, create a great memory, whether you live in Fort Collins or you're thinking about living in Fort Collins.
Right. The Colorado Shoe School. And for those of you listening who might not know Bellevue, Bellevue is just to the north. It's beautiful. Talk about a place that looks like it's out of a catalog. It's just adjacent to Fort Collins, just up to the north. So if you're going up to the Lowry State Park area, some of those great hikes, you go right through it. You can make shoes. Another thing you can do up there that's fascinating is that it's the Noosa yogurt factory.
The Howling Cow. You can go get ice cream and yogurt and do some fun things with. They have a tour also. You can go tour.
Google the Howling Cow Cafe, and it actually, if you also Google, like Trek, TREEK, you can, there's different cycle rides that are popular around here. And one of the cycle rides that goes, up into the Poudre Canyon area, and there's a couple that are, some are longer, some are shorter, but there are multiple that end at the Howling Cow Cafe.
Right, a reward.
So check that out. You do a ride. Yeah, a reward at the end, some ice cream, some coffee. But that Howling Cow Cafe is so beautiful. It's sitting right right there in Bellevue. It's connected to, it's part of that Noosa yogurt factory that you can tour. Very family friendly. Kids love it. They're selling all of the swag, of course, too, like the cow toys and things like that. But that's another really fun one to kind of check out. There are a lot of things, just this theme of it's not all about the breweries and the beer and the bars and the restaurants. I mean, there are just active things to get out and do. There's arts, there's crafts, there's biking, there's hiking, there's rafting. I mean, there's just so much exploring.
Right. There is so much to the north too. We didn't mention the Red Mountain Open Space, that partnered with Soapstone. That's 800 acres to go play.
I always forget about that.
Right? And people who bird love it out there. There is some ADA trail opportunities. If you want to mountain bike and not actually see hardly anyone, that's where I tell you to go.
Soapstone?
Soapstone.
Okay.
And
it's, if you Google Soapstone Prairie, I think that'll come up.
Yep. They just closed. They close at the end of November, and I think they'll open back up. It's either April or May. Just the wear and tear with winter in that particular terrain would be a little hard. So they winter quietly, and then it opens back up, and you can, see some bison out there with CSU. That's another opportunity if folks are out there. That's a really cool space.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Up at Soapstone, you see bison up there.
They have, there's a partnership with CSU. And so it is a consistent herd. That is an area where bison naturally would have transitioned when they were, going from one place to the other. And so it just, that's pretty amazing. That's another one to take a peek at.
Wow. There's a lot of really good nuggets coming out of this. I know everyone's going to really appreciate it. As we kind of, get closer to the end here, I'm just curious, kind of rapid fire. Let's go like favorite breakfast place.
Oh, Silver Grill.
Silver Grill. Great choice. Amazing cinnamon rolls. Amazing everything.
Newcomer. Breadfellows.
Breadfellows, yes. Incredible coffee. And they do have food, and it's really, really, really good food there.
They have a toast flight. I got to try that last week.
A toast flight. Wow. And they open up that big garage door, and it's just this open air environment right on Linden, kind of opening up to the river district there. It's an awesome location.
It is.
Great spot. What about lunch, dinner? Where are you going?
Oh, gosh. Ginger and Baker often calls my name. I have a couple of favorites there, and I already fessed up to being a pie addict. So definitely one of those. One that's a little bit off the beaten track is Simmer. It's off of Shields and kind of serves a whole different neighborhood, if you will.
Yeah, West Side is close. It's Shields and Drake.
Yep. So
another
that's
local, these are all local people,
right?
Local restaurateurs and multiple concepts in Fort Collins.
Absolutely. And again, it depends, where are you staying? Where's your family located, right? How do you find those kind of fun places? But I love a good happy hour at Simmer. That's a fun one. And
especially if you're doing a great hike on the west side of town, it's right there.
Mm-hmm. Obstacle Brewing, which, is right off of Harmony by Walmart, College and Harmony. They have a amazing hamburger. You got to get in and try their burger. Good price. And again, not overwhelming to be in there, but that's great on the trail too, like Mason. Or if you're going to head up to Horsetooth and kind of do the south end, that can be a great spot. I actually learned about that from a mountain biker.
Yeah. The trails go everywhere in town. I mean, you're weaving in and out of, I remember 2 summers ago, this really hit me. You're kind of on these trails and you see these neighborhoods. I'm in real estate, so you think you know all the neighborhoods. You're finding all these places you didn't even know about it, and you're seeing them from a different angle. But these trails go all through the city everywhere.
I know, which is
especially
fantastic.
Now, you can go to neighboring cities. Just miles and miles and miles. That's fascinating. Well, what haven't we covered that we should have covered? We've
done a lot. I know.
I'm even more excited to live here than I was before, and I know I knew I was going to enjoy this conversation.
Well, thank you. It's been fun, and you and I are both those eternal fans of Fort Collins, so it's pretty easy for us to just share the love, if you will, and to feel so fortunate about where we live and the people we get to live with, which I think is really amazing.
Right. And how can we support you and Visit Fort Collins? Is it just go to the website and start getting involved in more events, or what else can we do?
That's a great question. We love when you go and look at events, mostly because it supports our businesses, right? And that's what keeps everything strong, so that we have that amazing array of restaurants to go enjoy, or retail. I'm gonna mention Clothes Pony and Dandelion Toys. That is a place that not every community gets to have a local toy store anymore, and the sisters that run that are outstanding. They love what they do. You can see it. And you will find those pockets all over town. So find them. Our website often has some great spots for the whole community. Downtown, the DDA friends, they dig into that nicely too. So I would encourage people to really do that. And then, we have a mixer or a networker from time to time come to a Ram Talk, come do some of those new fun things with us, because we've talked about our new Welcome Center is Welcome Center by day and Community Hub by night. And so we're looking, again, to find ways to connect us. We're getting ready to embark on a new partnership with Firehouse Books and do an authors series, because there's a lot of authors that people don't realize live in Fort Collins. So that's coming first quarter of next year. So get out on that website and see who's here writing great books and talking about them, and more to come.
I love it. You mentioned our local toy store, Clothes Pony and Dandelion Toys. The 6 and 7-year-old, we've been on a first name basis there. But what a gem that is. And then you just mentioned Firehouse Books, which is another gem just right next to the Silver Grill. So you're planning your weekend here, do breakfast, do brunch at the Silver Grill, just walk right down Walnut to Firehouse Books, our local bookstore. Great spots. Cynthia, thank you for this. This was truly a pleasure.
Well,
I learned a lot.
you.
And, I'm going to get involved in this idea of it being a kind of a visitor center by day, but more of an event community hub place by night is fascinating to me. So you're going to see more of me. I think you're going to see some of the people who are listening to this show as well. I know it sounds like you have not had any issue with attendance at all. I mean, you've been filling it up, but
Room to grow.
What just a neat thing to be able to go out and do, and maybe weave that into going out to dinner, or going and getting a drink or something else like that in the Old Town area. So I can't wait. We'll definitely do that. And again, just thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.